I'm increasingly concluding that the only way forward is to start to redesign the markets and shape what companies do. A change agenda we've been talking about for 50 years is now coming absolutely smack bang into the mainstream, and that means it's suddenly becoming political because people don't like elements of it. They're pushing back, against heat pumps in Germany, farmers across Europe, the anti-ESG movement in the United States. We've got to do the politics increasingly, but at the same time, I'm an optimist. I think that the evidence is increasingly clear. Younger people certainly understand it. The big tension is between younger people and older people. Older people very often still are struggling with what's going on, the implications, their responsibility. And the problem with older people, and I'm one, is that they vote more. They still vote. They have a big political influence. I think we will see more of the anti-ESG backlash. I think people increasingly feel that whatever we do, it's going to have big consequences for their lives and their lifestyles. So one of the things I think we've got to do collectively is thinking about who's going to win, but who's going to lose out of all of this, or who is at risk of losses, and how do we support them through the transition. And some governments are doing that, but most of them are not properly addressing that. So for example, if you have a lot of people employed in fossil fuels, you can't simply take them all across and turn them into renewable energy engineers, but you can do some of that. The question is, if they're not going to become renewable energy engineers, what else can they become? How do you educate them for that? How do you prepare them for that? It's my 21st book, and it's the first one where I've really been somewhat autobiographical. So I've looked back at now 75 years of my life, 50 years of working in this space, and I've tried to say, here are some of the stories that change efforts that we were involved in. This is what worked, this is what didn't work. What can we learn from all of that? And then the conclusion is, well, that was 50 years. What's going to happen in the next 10 to 15? And the answer is more change than we've seen in the last 50, but it's not necessarily going to take us in the right direction. So it's going to go to breakdown at the same time as it goes to breakthrough. So leadership is going to be absolutely essential. It can't just come from people who are labeled leaders. It's got to come from, in some ways, many of us, if not all of us. The book is called Tickling Sharks, and it's called Tickling Sharks because much of my working life has involved getting very close in to very powerful people who really don't want to talk to people like us about how they might change. And the subtitle is How We Sold Business on Sustainability. So how we got the business world to think about some of this stuff. And everywhere I go here at the conference, people are using the word sustainability. When I set up a business in 1987 called Sustainability, we had to spell the word for people for about 3 or 4 years. They'd never heard of it. It didn't exist, at least in that sense. But now people understand that they have to talk about that. But the question is, what are they going to do? One of the things I see in younger colleagues and younger people I meet is growing anxiety about the future in general. My own daughters, our own daughters, decided, they're now in their 40s, they decided not to have children. One of them's had a child, but part of that was just a lack of confidence in the future, and I think that is extremely damaging for cultures, for societies, if younger people lose hope in the future. So we've got to address that as a matter of even greater urgency than, for example, COVID and pandemics and so on. So I think we've got to involve them The trouble is it's very easy to be anxious if you're not involved in practical action to change things, to develop solutions. So we've got to find ways to get younger people much more actively involved in practical change, because I think from that will come a greater understanding of the challenge that we face, but also a greater sense that this is actually in many ways doable as long as we work out ways in which we can all do it increasingly together. I think younger people, some of them, think that they can change the world as long as they can get a seat at the board table or a ministerial portfolio or whatever. Some of them might be able to do that, but actually I think they're going to need a huge amount of help and experience along the way. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have older people getting to the point where they think, yeah, we were environmentalists. No, they weren't. We tried, we failed, now it's over to the younger generation. I think that's very dangerous indeed. This is a pan-generational project or challenge. We've all got to work together in ways that we can almost hardly imagine at the moment. And part of what I'm trying to do is work out how we best do that. Every 5 to 6 years, I have a meltdown. It's like a caterpillar going into a chrysalis and something else crawling out over time. And I'm going through one of those at the moment. It's intensely emotional because you suddenly realize stuff that you've been doing for quite some time is not having the impact that you would want it to have. Every 5 or 6 years, I go through a process of just losing confidence in what I'm currently doing. And partly that's because I get to the point where I think I know what I'm meant to be doing and how to do it. And I get bored. So I want to move into new areas, try new things. And I'm going through one of those at the moment because I've worked 50 years on brands and business models and technology and supply chains, all that good stuff. But I'm increasingly concluding that the only way forward, in addition to all of that, is to start to redesign the markets and shape what companies do. For example, we've recently had Unilever, we've had Shell making big commitments on climate change and then announcing that they're going to scale back. That's largely because markets are saying don't go so fast or don't do that. So we've got to work out how to turn the dial on markets, and that's part of the how do we do that? That question is in my mind at the moment, and so I'm talking to lots of people who've tried it, who are trying it, trying to learn from them. Oddly, I'm optimistic because I think it's only in periods like that where everything is changing that people start to challenge their own thinking. When everything's working fine, they say, well, just go away and don't tell us what we should be doing. It's working moderately well. But after a couple of years of things really not working well, people start to ask bigger questions. They start to think about the system as a whole, not just what the bit that they're operating. And I think that's where we increasingly find ourselves. Talk without action is today's mistake. Action without talk is tomorrow's mistake. And I say that because if we are successful, we're going to make more failures in the next 10 to 15 years than in our, for a very long time. And unless we discuss those as we make them and share them, and people learn from that sort of collective experience, this isn't going to go nearly fast enough.